everyone, we have another dotting video. Enjoy! And welcome back to another Squdge craft video. So today we are doing an apple. I got a lovely commission for 13 of these beauties for someone who's leaving their primary school and want to treat all their teachers. So it's really exciting. So the first thing I do on the apples, same as I do with any of the others, is find the centre point and then draw 8 dividing lines. So you've got the points of the compass, the 4, and then I fill in 2 in the middle. You can do more if you like, totally up to you. Then I use my compass to draw some circles. These are just guidelines, these do not need to be exact, there's no specific width between them, it's just drawing some circles so that I know on one side I am an even space on the other side. Then I'm going to remove most of the chalk dust. So this is just a chalk pencil, both pencils you've seen are a chalk pencil. Unfortunately the mechanical one doesn't fit inside the compass, so I have to use it for that. Okie dokie, paint. I am going to be using greens and reds. They want just combination greens and red apples. So I've got 3 different greens, a light green, a mid green and a dark green. And then I've got a red, a dark red, and then I'm going to use the lighter of those 2 reds and add some white in, just a little bit at a time, until we get the sort of colour we want. We do not want it to go pink, we just want it to be a lighter red. Now when you're doing dots, your paint consistency is really, really important. If it is too thick, you will get little points, which is great for texture, but not necessarily what everybody is after. If it is too wet, then your dots will spread and they won't keep their nice shape. You won't get that nice domed effect. So you need to make sure that your paint is the right consistency. If your paint is out of a bottle, more or less it's going to be the right consistency. You may need to thin it a tiny bit. If it's out of a tube, you will probably need to thin it down with either water, pouring medium or thinner medium. I will link the thinner medium that I use down in the comments along with everything else. Okay, so when you've got your paint ready, we are good to go now. I was going a bit fast here trying to be clever and my hand slipped and I ended up getting a load of green and red paint mixed. Please take your time, you do not need to do it this quickly. So I'm going to clear up my mess and then we're going to get started. So what you want to do is figure out what colours you want included in your design. Now you can do a mandala style pattern where you have a sort of almost geometric style pattern that is symmetrical. Alternatively, you can do random dots. You can do them wherever you like. Now for the apple base, I'm going to be doing a mandala style. So that means that for me personally, I start with a relatively large circle in the middle. Depends on the size of your canvas. These apples are just over 4 inches in width. And then if you remove the leaf and the stalk, they're just over 4 inches in height. So I go with a sort of middle-sized larger dot in the centre, and then I'm going to use my smallest tool to do these tiny dots. Now if you've seen my previous videos, you will not have seen these green and purple tools. I treated myself to a new set of tools which go up to a huge 40mm circle, so for when I'm doing my larger canvases it is so much fun. However, this apple, far too small to be using any of those. So I'm using my new tools. I do have a couple of the little tiny nail dotting tools just to get some very tiny detail dots, but the majority of the time I am using these new tools and I'm going from 1mm up to 15mm. Now that dot in the centre is a 14mm dot. That is the largest one I am going to use on this apple, but I just thought I'd let you know that there are other sizes. So large dot in the middle and then smaller dots around. Now if you notice, I did it with the smaller dots and I'm going to do it with this size dot. I do the compass points first. Even though I've got all my lines drawn, I personally like to do the northeast southwest dots to help me with my spacing, even though I've got the lines there. You don't have to do that, you can just go around in a circle and dot on the lines, whatever is most comfortable for you. I personally just like to do those sort of compass points so that I am really aware of my symmetry when I'm making these. So we're going to alternate different greens and reds through to try and make this pattern really look like it's got flow and movement to it. Sometimes with apples I have done them single colour. Sometimes I've tried to do sort of half and half where part of it is green, part of it is red. You know how some apples are a mix. It's entirely up to you how you choose to do it. For this one I specifically concentrated on one colour per ring essentially. So we've got the red in the centre, then a green ring, then a red ring, now we're doing a green ring. But it's entirely up to you, you can do it however you like. The majority of this apple I am using dots. I am however using a tiny bit of white as a highlight and we're going to drag those points out. So in between that 3rd and 4th row I am slotting a little white dot. Now please always check even with spacing drawn out like this, and even when you're being the most careful, you may not have identical spacing all around. So always check that your size dot will fit in every single space. Then I'm going to take my tiny little dotting tool and I'm going to drag these out so that they become almost like a teardrop style point that is just, and I mean just, longer than those green dots outer edge. Now obviously you do whatever colour scheme works best for you. I do find if you try and do too many colours it can get a bit much, but you do you. So for these colours I did the brighter green and the brighter red in the centre, and then for the second row where the white is I did the darker red and the darker green. You do however you like. I really like adding these sort of drag shapes in because it adds some detailing. Now I'm just scraping off because a couple of them, the ends weren't quite thin enough. So I'm just using a little scrapey tool. It's literally like a pointed tool, like a pokey tool for paper crafting. And I'm just scraping those edges off to get a nice fine point on those white edges. Okie dokie, next row we're going to go to a slightly larger tool and we are going to take the hair out of the paint because in my house there is cat fur everywhere. Magrat likes to be in every single project. So we're going to do another row of slightly larger red dots. Now as you can see here, those circles that I've drawn are really helping me because I know that's how far I am spacing these out. They are going along that line that I've drawn, and that just gives me the ability to keep a pattern essentially. So we're going slightly smaller and the lightest, brightest green again in the middle. I do quite like doing a circle that has large dots and small dots in the same ring. I think it makes a really nice design that kind of draws your eye in because it's got two different sizes there. So that's what we're doing for this row, and then we're just going to carry on as we go out, adding different rows of different colours and adding tiny little aspects of white. Now there is something called walking the dots, where you do a dot and then without reloading your tool you move it along and you get smaller and smaller dots. So I've tried to do this with my new tools, however they're not particularly good at it, so I switched to one of my nail dotting tools. I think the thing is the nail tools actually have a ball on the end. It's a little metal ball and it holds paint better for walking the dots than my newer 3D printed tools do, because they have a flat end. They make beautiful dots. They're not as great for walking the dots, but hey ho, you live you learn. So I'm going to use one of my medium sized of the nail dotting tools. So mine is the green one. It's the largest in this set, I believe. It's like 1, possibly 2 millimeters. So exactly the same size of the green and purple tool that I was using, but it just holds the paint better for walking the dots specifically. Switch back and we're going to sit our darkest green in between those spaces just to fill it in. You can leave as much or as little black space as you choose. It is entirely up to you and your design. Now generally on a pattern, as you get further out from the centre, you want to make your dots larger. The main reason for this being that you have a larger circumference of that ring. So obviously the ring in the very centre goes around the centre. As you get further out, those rings get larger and larger. So in theory, you want to add larger and larger dots to make your pattern look like it flows nicely. But obviously here, we don't have a lot of space to do bigger and bigger dots. So we're going to stick with the same sort of size and we're going to go through, add them on, and we're going to add some elements in between them. Now you get as creative as you want with this. You do 1 dot, you do 6 dots, you do swipes, you do drags, you do ovals. It is entirely up to you how you fill up your design. Now on this particular apple, I did not go around the outside edge and make a border. Okay, on the leaf I will do that, which you'll see in a second. But on the apple I did not, and it leaves you with a very different look. We got some brown out for the stalk, the stem of the apple. So we're just going to do a few of the smaller dots on there just to fill it out. And then I'm going to take the very tiniest nail dotting tool that I have, and we're just going to fill in some of those teeny tiny gaps with the same colour, just so that it really fills that space with the brown. Okay, so I'm just going to go in there, any little black spaces I can see, added a little dot. Now this is what I mean. On the leaf here, I'm going to go around the outside edge first, so that you get a really pristine leaf shape. You don't have to do this on the leaf, I have chosen to do the outside edge and sort of the veins of the leaf in the darkest green that I own, and then use the lighter green to fill in the leaf for some contrast. You don't have to do any of this. You could do your leaf as a small mandala. There's enough room in there to do a little circle. You could do one on there. You could do random dots like I'm going to do with the lighter green. It is entirely up to you. But as I say, doing that outside border gives you a really defined shape, whereas on the apple, I haven't done that. So as you'll see, there are some dots that go off the edge. You can see the red one there on the bottom of the apple hangs off the edge. So it makes it look like the pattern is still extending further than the wood piece. And you can do it in a variety of ways. You can do it with the border, without the border. You just get a slightly different look. I'll add a couple of pictures in at the end of an apple that I did with the outer border, so you can just see the difference. Okay, so here is a solid red apple that I did. As you can see, it does not have the border. And the second one has a border, so you get a really defined edge shape, but it's entirely up to you. We're going to go in with a few more white dots just to add some brightness to it. Obviously, all of these colours are still very wet. As they dry, the colour will change ever so slightly. What I would suggest you do is whenever you get a new set of paints, swatch them. I'll add a picture in of my swatch booklet. What I do is I just take some card, and with all of my wood chipboard pieces, I will always base coat them with gesso. Now gesso is a primer, but the ones I have also count as the base colour. So I have black and I have a white. So all I do is I take a piece of card, I paint half of it white, half of it black, using my white gesso and my black gesso, and then I practice doing my dots on top so I can see exactly how that colour dries on a white background and a black background, and it really helps you when you're doing designs like this to know what it's going to look like when it's dried. Okay, so we did another little row of bright green dots around the edge as well. We're just going to draw these white ones out into tiny little drags so that we get this really nice shape. And then I like though doing this sort of shape on apples because to me they almost look like the seeds. I know that's not exactly where the seeds would be sat, but for me it's sort of like almost like drawing an apple seed on an apple. It just makes me smile. So yeah, carry on drawing those out. Now, the vast majority of the apple is complete, but as you can see, those top corners, we've got a fair bit of black space. So we're going to invent an additional ring that you're only going to see in certain places. So as you can see, I'm going around with that green, and we are dotting in every other space wherever it would show up. We're just going to add a tiny bit of that green. And then we're going to see there's a little bit more space now up in that top corner. So we're going to add the darker green there. And you just want to make it seem like the pattern is continuing beyond the shape. That's the main aim here, so that you're not just left with a circle in the centre and then some space around the edge. However, if that's what you would like to do, if you would like to have a circle in the centre of your piece and leave the outside edges plain, that works perfectly as well. When I'm working on a square or a rectangle canvas, for example, I will do that. I will have my circular shape and then the outside edges will remain black. I find on smaller pieces it's easier not to do that, but obviously you do what works best for you. So here we go. As you can see, I'm going to go in now with my smallest tool, and we're going to use that bright green to fill in all the gaps on the leaf. So as it's wet, it'll be a bit, okay, great, but once it dries, you will essentially have the bright green leaf with what looks like dark spaces showing up the border and the veins. And I think it's a really, really beautiful way to do a leaf like this, because the leaf isn't the focal point, so you don't need to do it in a special pattern. I am just randomly dotting these dots in wherever they will fit, doing one dot that's fresh out the paint and then doing a slightly smaller second dot somewhere else, and then I'm going to go in and do all of the teeny tiny spaces that I can until the whole thing pretty much is covered. Now you can almost see the leaf veins here as the paint on the darker green is starting to dry, because I did leave it a few minutes between doing the dark and the light just in case they touch. You don't want them to merge into one dot. Now ideally you don't want your dots to touch each other, but you do want to get as close as possible to each other to really fill that space in. Unless you like the black spaces, in which points space your design out to add and include those black spaces. That is entirely up to you. Okay, I'm just going to add some small final details on here, and while I do that, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. Leave a comment down below, let me know what your favourite part of this apple was, and also when do your schools break up around the world, because everyone breaks up at different times and it fascinates me. Yeah, going to add some small tiny white dots in, and then we're going to be done with this apple. So let me know what you think. I really want to thank you all for spending time with me today. I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. And yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Keep crafting. Bye.